This is the official EFL Podcast.
Hello again and welcome to the podcast. On today's show, we're joined by Sky Sports' Andy Hinchciffe and Leyton Orient captain Jobi McAnuff. How are we doing, first of all, guys?
Very well, thank you.
I'm very well indeed, yes, good.
We'll be previewing some of the weekend's league fixtures, of course, in a second. But I want to get your reaction, first of all, Andy, to the Carabao Cup third round draw, which you actually took part in yourself. Two of your former sides drawn against each other in Everton and Sheffield Wednesday. You must be really excited for that one.
Yeah, it promises to be a great game. It's what the Carabao Cup should be all about. Obviously, lower league opposition playing the big Premier League boys. But I think we need to christen this game the Hinchciffe Derby. I think that's what we need to. We need a trophy for it as well. I think a gold treatment table would be fitting. A trophy for the winners to pick up. But it's going to be a tough game for Wednesday, clearly, because Everton. If you look at how they played against Lincoln, Marco Silva's team selection as well, it's a very strong squad that Everton have got. They're clearly looking to try and win this competition, which is what I want to see from the Premier League teams. It's really healthy. But this is going to be more of a test, I would think, for Wednesday than for Everton. I know from kind of bitter experience what a big pitch Hillsborough is as well. That'll suit a Premier League team. So I do see Everton going through in that tie.
Yeah, but the Hinchciffe Derby, it sounds like an epic clash, that, doesn't it?
It doesn't really, though, does it? That's the problem.
Well, legend for both teams, Andy. You never know. It could be something that's on the cards, maybe.
I think legend is pushing it a little bit too far.
Maybe. Because I've got you on the podcast, I've got to say that about you.
Okay, fair enough.
Jobi, your former team, Reading, face a tough task at Wolves as well. After coming back to beat Plymouth, Jose Gomez hasn't had a bad run, a bad start rather, to the season, really, has he, after defeats in the first two games? What have you made of how they performed so far this season?
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I was a little bit worried after the first couple of results. Real inconsistency to the Reading team over the last sort of year or so, and it didn't seem to change, with the arrival of Gomez. Obviously kept them up in the end. And I thought the start of the season would be really, really important just to see how his ideas have come across in pre-season and whether the players have really been able to implement them. So, yeah, I was a little bit unsure to start with, but they've really recovered well. They've had a decent run of form now, and obviously the win in midweek to get through to play Wolves is a real shot in the arm. They looked like they were in a little bit of danger against Plymouth, but managed to come through that, and I think that'll give everyone the confidence that they need. And it'd be a real good game for them. I think with Wolves being in, European action this year, it'd be really interesting to see what team they put out. I would expect them, to really prioritise that and the league, and there may be some changes for them, in the Carabao Cup. So I think it's a game Reading can really go and really just enjoy. It's a lovely, lovely place to go and play your football, and I'm sure they're all looking forward to it.
Yeah, some other tasty ties in there as well. Portsmouth taking on Southampton, one of the ones to look out for. Let's now focus on the first match we're going to preview in the Championship, the Friday night fixture live on Sky between Cardiff and Fulham. Andy, let's first focus on Cardiff. 2 wins from 5, not the kind of start Neil Warnock will have been hoping for, and a 3-0 defeat against Luton in midweek. Do Cardiff have to get a result in this one?
I'm not sure they have to get a result. It's not going to be the end of the world if they don't. They'll want to after that really poor showing against Luton in the Carabao Cup. He made a lot of changes, 9 changes, Neil. So that clearly didn't go well. He needs a response from that. But Neil has so much credit in the bank with what he's achieved at Cardiff. There's no real pressure on him yet. They've only played 5 games. Things can change very quickly in the Championship. We've seen that before. But the game itself is a real clash of styles. You see how Fulham play. They are favourites. They love to keep hold of the ball, real possession-based game. Some of the most dangerous attackers in the Championship as well. But Cardiff are very effective. The way that they play isn't that easy on the eye, but they're really effective, create chances, score goals. So I do see things changing for Cardiff as the games go by. And 2 seasons ago, Cardiff went up playing this way. So I'm not expecting Neil to change anytime soon. There's no need to fix what isn't broken. It's just they're not quite getting the results that you would have expected from them at the start of the season. The pressure will grow if this carries on, but the way that Neil goes about it, the way the team is structured, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually beat Fulham and went on a decent run from here.
Yeah, Jobi, 2 defeats on the bounce for Fulham though, but all things considered, it hasn't been a bad start for Scott Parker, has it? 5th in the league, seemingly going well.
Yeah, I think he'd be pretty pleased, to be honest. 9 points obviously puts them right up there to start the season, and I think they'd feel a little bit hard done by, losing the last game against Forest, hugely dominant, in pretty much all aspects of the game, apart from the scoreline, which is the most important thing. So, I really fancy them to have a really good season this year. As Andy's touched on, they want to keep the ball and, dominate the possession. So I think they'd be really difficult to play against. And I think they just need to find that cutting edge to go with, as I say, that possession that they've got. And, with the likes of, Mitrovic and players like that, Tom Kearney, Bobby Reid and Anthony Knockaert, I think they'll have a real good season this year.
Yeah, Andy, we're going to touch on those players now. I mean, for Neil Warnock, he obviously prides himself of having tough teams to beat at this level. But when you are up against the likes of Kearney, Mitrovic and Knockaert, how do you prepare for that as a manager?
It is going to be tough. Neil, of course, is vastly experienced, and that's been the big surprise with Cardiff. The way they've given away cheap goals, they didn't do that 2 seasons ago when they got promoted. They do need to tighten up at the back, but they've Sol Bamba's injured. They brought in Aidan Flint. That's taken a bit of time for him to get acclimatised. But when you're facing the best front three in the Championship, it's tough. But Nottingham Forest really showed how to kind of reduce Fulham's effectiveness. Yes, they have the majority of the ball, 65% more, but you can limit the danger men. If you see what happened, Fulham were kind of reduced to shots from distance. 60% of their shots against Forest were from outside of the box. So Forest, they sat deep. They actually doubled up in the wide areas. They forced Cavaliero and Knockaert to come infield, where obviously you've got more bodies in there. It's tougher to break through. So I'm sure Cardiff will have watched that Forest game and realised how Forest played it to get the result. Fulham made some mistakes in that game as well, which allowed Lewis Graben to kind of score a couple of goals as well. But ultimately, when you're playing against that front three for kind of 85 minutes, you think we've got the job done here. We're okay. If you lack of concentration, and they will catch you out. It's not just the front three. There's obviously Tom Kearney. Hansen gets forward as well. They've got so many players that can punish you. So your organisation is vital, but concentration against a team like Fulham is of paramount importance.
Yeah, Jobi, like both these sides, you, of course, had that one season with Reading in the Premier League. How difficult is it, though, when you get relegated back to the Championship to pick yourself up again for the challenge? Because it is a relentless league, isn't it?
Oh, most definitely. I think that could go some way to explaining, Cardiff's start this year. I think sometimes it's more of a mental readjustment than a physical one. And, the disappointment of not still being in the Premier League can lead to a bit of a sluggish start, which clearly Cardiff have had. Fulham, on the other hand, with a change of manager or the permanent appointment of Scott Parker, and seem to have a slightly different outlook on things. And it's just about readjusting and really getting to grips with, as you said, the relentless nature of the league. It's quite unforgiving at times, and certainly not quite as much of the glitz and glamour as the Premier League. But it's a fantastic place to play your football. And I'm sure, as I say, once this early part of the season's gone by, then Cardiff will really focus, and I really expect them to be right up there this year as well. Neil Warnock's been there, done it, very much got the t-shirt, and I think with him at the helm and with that experience of going up, the players will be better for that, and I'm sure they'll come good as well come the end of the season.
Yeah, and Andy, from Warnock's press conference this week, he says that Fulham are the underdogs. Do you believe that, or is that just mind games from Neil Warnock?
You've got to love Neil Warnock. I mean, just when you think he's going to say what the other coach says, he says something different. It's all mind games. Fulham are favourites. Okay, the team's playing very different ways, and both are capable of winning the game. But Fulham are one of the strongest teams, along with Leeds, in the league. Even though it's away from home at Cardiff, they still are favourites. Now, usually a coach will say just that to kind of pile all the pressure onto the opposition. But Neil's not a run-of-the-mill coach. He fancies his team every game that they play. He backs them all the way. So I'm sure he made those comments with a bit of a wry smile. But it's all down to his experience in the game and just his outlook as well, and the way he likes to twist things as well. But it all stems from the amount of games that he's covered, and he's not going to say what every other coach says.
Jobi, going back to Scott Parker, I asked a similar question of Michael Brown last week. I don't know if you've experienced this in your career, but what is it like playing for a manager who's been the assistant and then steps up to become manager? From a player's point of view, it must be a little bit weird.
It can be. It all depends on the manager's approach. I think I've had it a few times in my career, and sometimes it's gone well, some it hasn't. And I think I remember one example, and it was a first team coach, and he got announced as the manager, and literally the next day he came in and it was like, right, you've got to call me gaffer. You know, it was just he wanted to make a point, but I felt like he went too far. And you've obviously got a relationship with him, you know, from your previous experience working with him. So I think there's a real fine balance to be had. You know, with that being said, even as a first team coach, you've got your way of doing things, you know, your standards, your habits that the players should be used to. So it shouldn't be a massive change for those lads that have, you know, had a coach change into a manager. And for me, the positives far outweigh the negatives. You know, the players will know, you know, as I say, his way of doing things and, you know, his style, and it should work quite well, you know. And I think there's no real period of time that people need to get to know each other as such. You know, everyone's familiar with the way that they work, and I think you're seeing that early on in how Fulham have started.
Now moving on to the early kickoff on Saturday between Bristol City and Middlesbrough. Andy, looking at Borough, a lot of focus has been on them changing their philosophy under Jonathan Woodgate this summer. Another manager, of course, who's taken over from being an assistant to being the manager. How much time do you have to implement something like that as a manager? Only 1 win in 5, of course, for Borough.
Yeah, I covered Middlesbrough in that crazy opening kind of game against Luton, the 3-3 draw. It was a brilliant game. It was amazing to see Middlesbrough playing with such freedom after, of course, playing under Tony Pulis, very pragmatic. But even then, I remember after that game, I thought this is great to see them doing this, but surely it'll only last so long. The fans wanted to see more adventurous football. I think they'd had enough of the way Tony was going about it. But would they settle for the team playing with a bit more adventure, but finishing, say, in mid-table? Because this is, you know, Middlesbrough, and promotion has to be the aim every single season. So I think style over substance will only last so long. I think eventually the pressure will grow on Jonathan to produce kind of balanced but winning performances. And I can see that pressure growing around Christmas time. If they're in the top 6, it'll maybe be a little bit easier for him. I can't see them being up there because it will take time to implement it, because it is such a big change. A lot of younger players in that Middlesbrough team as well. But ultimately, I think it's great Middlesbrough have gone down this road. But I'm looking at around Christmas time, New Year, depending on where they are, the Middlesbrough fans might say, well, we're enjoying the football, but we're not winning enough games. So the pressure will ramp up on him.
Yeah, Jobi, Bristol City unbeaten since that opening day defeat to Leeds. 3 wins on the bounce, up to 4th in the table. How impressed have you been with the way they'd come back from that opening day defeat?
Yeah, very impressed. Obviously losing to a very, very good Leeds team, so I'm sure they wouldn't have got too carried away with that and too down. You know, they went and sort of stabilised with a point, you know, against Birmingham, and then since then on, have gone and won some games. So, you know, once again, they've got some real quality in their squad, players that I expect to really make an impact on the league this year. Like Benica Phobie, you know, he's got a fantastic track record, certainly at this level. And Vyman up front also. So I expect them to score goals. I think they've really done well, obviously, you know, in terms of responding to that first defeat, and also the back of last year and not quite, you know, finishing off the job after having such a good season up to a point. So I think that experience can really, you know, help them this year, and they can sort of look back on maybe 1 or 2 things that didn't quite go well enough last year and try and work on those. And you know, I think they're going to have a really successful season. You know, it's a real tough job getting in those playoff places, but I fully expect Bristol City to be one of those teams this season.
That's a big call. And Andy, Lee Johnson has actually stated that he expects Borough as well to be challenging for promotion come to the end of the season. Do you agree with that, or is he saying it out of respect?
I think he's right to say it, and mainly it's due to the kind of the stature of Middlesbrough as a club, one of the biggest in the Championship. As I mentioned earlier, there Middlesbrough are undertaking this huge transition from kind of Pulis to Woodgate, and the only problem is how quickly that kind of winning balance, playing good football but winning games, can be found. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think winning kind of in style is not easily produced. We've seen that for many top coaches. It's very hard to get it to work. So I think in theory Middlesbrough should be in the mix for promotion every season, but expecting it this season is probably over optimistic. But it's good to hear Lee Johnson appreciating kind of the values of another club as well. I agree with Jobi. I do expect Bristol City to be in the top 6. I'm not sure I see Middlesbrough in that same category.
Jobi, as a player, what do you make of that when a new manager comes in? Coming back to the point about Jonathan Woodgate, when a new manager comes in, not necessarily because results have been poor, but to change the philosophy of how you play? Which is more important, do you believe?
Well, it's a good question. I think clearly results are the most important thing. That's the be all and end all. That's what managers are judged on. And I think particularly for a club like Middlesbrough, whose ambition clearly is to get promoted and get back into the Premier League, results will obviously be very, very important to them. They've obviously made a decision to try and change the way that they want to play. So I think with that, there has to be a bit of time allowed for Jonathan Woodgate to get that style across. It takes time, particularly coming after Tony Pulis and the way that he plays. I mean, I had a similar situation when I moved to Reading initially with Brendan Rodgers, and that was off the back of Steve Coppell in terms of getting the ball forward quickly, getting it wide to the wingers, getting crosses in the box, and then Brendan, who wanted to go in and really play out from the back, play through the lines. And it takes time. You have players there that are used to doing one thing, and that takes time for them to adjust, but also the crowd, so I think that'd be a real important thing. I think the fact that it's Jonathan Woodgate will give him a little bit more time also, with his standing at the club. And I hope he's given the time to change things. But as we've seen in the past, if the results aren't forthcoming, then, I think some things can change, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like we saw with Brendan at Reading, he didn't get the time and then eventually did end up getting the time with Swansea and got them promoted, didn't he? Andy, we've talked about Borough's new philosophy, obviously, but Bristol City also have an attacking style of play. Are you expecting an open game in this one as well? Bearing in mind that 3-3 at the start of the season, which you covered.
Yeah, I certainly hope so, and I probably expect so from what we've seen from these two so far. Confidence has been quickly restored at Ashton Gate after that sobering opening game defeat to Leeds, where Leeds were absolutely outstanding. But I think wins, you kind of breed confidence. They've had 3 straight wins, Bristol City. And we know with the way Lee plays, he wants to be progressive. And his team have been playing more kind of expansive football for longer than Jonathan Woodgate. So they're kind of further down the road in playing that way. So I'm expecting Bristol City to win that game. But I'm hoping for a few goals in that match as well, because Middlesbrough will try and play on the front foot as well. And it's good to see them doing that. But I think Bristol City have a bit too much nous for them.
Jobi, going back to Jonathan Woodgate, though, he said he's determined to go into the international break on a high with a win. Just how important is that for players, especially when you've not been on the best of runs like Middlesbrough?
Yeah, it's vital, really. It's a long couple of weeks if you're going into it, one on the back of a defeat, and two, an extended period without winning a game, really. And it will give him a bit of time, if they can get that result, to really focus and work on the things that he wants to get across. And with a new style, as we've spoken about, it does take that time, and sometimes not having that game, that international break, can really help you get those hours on the training ground that you need. And I'm sure they'll be really hoping for a positive result, just to settle everybody down a little bit. And also it's important for the players to buy into that new philosophy, to get the results that almost justify the work that they're doing. The longer that goes without the results, then you might get 2 or 3 that are not quite as dialed in as they should be. And, that can spread very quickly. So I think for all concerned, it'll be very important to get a good result heading into the international break.
Yeah, it should be a free-flowing game of football. Now moving on to the first v second clash with Leeds taking on Swansea. Andy, I suppose it isn't surprising really to see Leeds up there, but for Swansea, another convincing win against Birmingham on Sunday. Is this team the real deal, do you believe?
Well, I think this game will show us probably more than any other just how seriously to take Swansea as promotion contenders. They've been brilliant so far, but they face, in my eyes, kind of the best team in the division away from home. There's no sterner test than that. Swansea, as we've seen, are a young, kind of dynamic team. They've coped effortlessly so far. But how they manage at Ellen Road will tell us whether they have the character. And that's the important thing, the characters to sustain a promotion challenge, because clearly their ability is undoubted. We know they can play. But if Leeds dominate the game, which they tend to do in terms of possession, can Swansea find a way to win if Leeds dominate the game? So we'll learn, probably whatever happens, whatever the score is, we'll learn a lot more about Swansea from this game than we will do about Leeds.
Yeah, Jobi, it's been well publicised, obviously, that Leeds have been, had a great start and played some terrific football so far this year. Last week against Stoke being a good example of that. You played in a promotion-winning side last year. Do you think that Leeds have what it takes to go up?
Oh, undoubtedly. I think as I touched on a bit earlier, that experience of just missing out last year, getting to the semi-finals, obviously keeping the manager was massive. I think that was the first thing that everybody at the club wanted to do, and once he decided he was going to stay, I think that would have given everyone a real focus to get promoted this year. They all know what the goal is. They play some fantastic football. It's a massive, massive club that I, for one, would like to see back in the Premier League. I think, with the fan base and the type of football they're playing now, they're going to be hard pressed not to go and do the job this year. So, right throughout the team, there's class, there's quality. None more so with the forward line. Goals come from everywhere at the moment, and I can certainly see them being right up there this season. I fully expect them to get promoted automatically.
Didn't get there, of course, though, last season, did they? Andy, I know it's obviously so much earlier in the season, and please tell me if I'm stupid for asking this question, but when we saw Norwich go to Elland Road last season and be probably the first team to outplay Leeds, and then Sheffield United win there after a tenacious performance, do Swansea have to do something similar if they are going to, be talked about as serious top two contenders?
I would never say you ask stupid questions. It's a very, very good question. I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair in many ways to kind of judge this Swansea side with Norwich and Sheffield United. They were teams with very different makeups. They had more experience than Swansea. Swansea is a younger team. And I just don't think it's the fact that Swansea have to win to prove their point. It is very early in the season. It's the manner in which they play and how they approach it. They've got to show kind of the traits that mean you can go the distance in the Championship. It is a combination of character and ability. I've just been so impressed with Swansea. That transition to Steve Cooper from Graham Potter has been seamless. And they can learn. Obviously, they'll probably watch those games, the Sheffield United and Norwich performances at Elland Road, and say, well, there's elements of that we can maybe adapt. But they'll want to do it their way. Steve will want to do it his way. And obviously, his bunch of players are very different from Norwich and Sheffield United. So, yeah, you can take elements and learn lessons from those games, but you have to do it your own way. And I think he'll be really looking forward to it because, of course, sometimes when things necessarily don't go so easily or you're up against very good teams, you learn more than when you win 3 or 4-0. So that's how football is. And Steve, whatever happens, will learn a hell of a lot from this game, I'm sure.
Yeah, Joby, Swansea striker Boya Baston, signed for the club 3 years ago for a club record fee, but fails to make an impact. He's come back from 2 seasons out on loan, back in the starting lineup, and already has 5 goals. How does something like that happen?
I'll be honest, I couldn't tell you. It's an unbelievable turnaround for a player that, I think initially bought for a lot of money. £15 million is a lot in anyone's book, and just didn't quite, hit the ground running there. At a difficult time for the club, it must be said.
When in the Premier League, of course, as well.
Yeah, and I think then going away and not having the best, it's different if he'd gone away and had a really, really good season or 2 away, and then Swansea wanted to bring him back to get him going, but that wasn't the case. He's been plagued by injuries, hasn't scored a lot of goals in the last 2 years on loan back in Spain. And he didn't even travel apparently to the pre-season camp, with the first team squad. He stayed back and was with the under-23s. So I think it just goes to show with a fresh set of eyes, obviously Steve Cooper coming in, willing to try new things and new players really. So I think him having a clean slate has really helped, and credit to him for coming back and being in shape, and being ready to go and score the goals that he has done so far. It's a remarkable story really, and it's great to see, as I say, a player who didn't quite hit it off when he first come, really start to get himself going.
Yeah, Andy, another man who's, firing at the minute is Pablo Hernandez. Vital to how Leeds play. He's got more assists than anyone in the Championship since he arrived at the club. How vital will he be in this one and throughout the season?
I think every single game that Leeds play, Pablo Hernandez is a player that look to have an influence on the game. And he was amazing last season. I wondered, like I did with Leeds as a team, whether they'd be able to reproduce what we saw last season. This season, they look even stronger this season. Pablo Hernandez looks even more influential. But I do feel what's really important about seeing Leeds play this season, it's not just Hernandez. They do have other players to kind of carry that creative and goal-scoring threat. We got Click, there's Harrison in there. Bamford has started the season really strongly, which he needed to do. He needs to score more goals. So with players kind of stepping up and taking the burden off Hernandez, it just allows him to maybe relax a little bit more. It's not just kind of him alone entrusted with winning the games. I think that reduction of pressure on him, he becomes even more of a threat. So I think Bielsa will be really pleased with the kind of the structure of the team, the fitness levels of the team, but the fact they're not a one-man band. They have 4 or 5 players like all good teams need. You can't just rely on one player no matter how good he is. So actually, strangely, having more players kind of getting involved in scoring goals and making goals, we'll see even more from Pablo Hernandez, which is scary for the rest of the championship.
Yeah, Joby, 2 of those players who are making an impact off the bench are Eddie Nketiah and Helder Costa, who've impressed in their games in the Carabao Cup. How does Bielsa find a way of getting them into the starting lineup? Does he have to?
I think for the time being, with the team doing so well, I think it's about that for him and having that consistency. And obviously everyone is performing. I think for Eddie Nketiah, he's come in and made a massive impact, with the goals he scored and that different dimension that he's given, the attack. And it's the same with Helder Costa, really. And for a manager, he must be, in dreamland. He's got, the starting boys that are doing well. They're scoring the goals and winning games. And when he needs that little bit of impact, he's got it coming off the bench. The more goals they score, the more pressure there's going to be on him. But, I'm sure that's, why he is the manager, because he's got to make those tough decisions. And, it's a real, tough league. Players go through bits of form and then they fall out of it. They might pick up injuries. So I'm sure he'll be glad that he's got that strength in depth. The one player possibly that might be looking over his shoulder a little bit is Jack Harrison, who's got the 1 goal so far, and obviously with Nketiah with a few goals to his name already, that could be the one area that he looks to adjust slightly. But I think he'll be happy with how they've performed so far, and probably won't be making any rash decisions to start with. That's for sure.
But also, what you have to appreciate is Marcelo Bielsa is such an incredibly strong, well-respected coach that those lads, I think the first thing they have to be is very fit. The stories I hear is when Helder Costa first came to the club, they just basically ran him for 10 days, 2 weeks to get him up to the fitness levels that the other Leeds players had. So there's a fitness issue there with any new player coming to Leeds. And also, you're not going to tell Bielsa, I should be in the team. He knows exactly what he's doing. So those players, all they can do is what they're doing when they get opportunities, create goals, score goals. And then maybe when injuries come along, there's a possibility of starting. But it looks like Bielsa has his starting 11, which he's pretty consistent in terms of putting out. So it's great to have those options, and there will be injuries and suspensions, and they will get their chance as well. But he's one coach that you're not going to push around. No player is going to insist on to Bielsa, I've got to be in the team. You'll be in the team when he's ready to put you in the team as well. So I think he's very keen to have really good characters as well that are willing to play their part from the bench, wait for their opportunities and not cause problems.
Yeah, you can't really imagine Bielsa's door being knocked down by players, can you? begging to be in that team, can you? It's not the sort of manager who comes across like that.
No.
Andy, now moving on to our featured game in League One, the pressure on Ipswich to earn promotion. We're featuring the Ipswich v Shrewsbury match. The pressure on Ipswich to earn promotion this year is obviously immense. So far, so good. Obviously, top of the table, but level on points with 4 other teams. How difficult is it for Paul Lambert to operate under that sort of pressure?
Well, I think if you consider kind of the difficulties that Ipswich and especially Paul Lambert have faced, it's extraordinary how quickly he's turned what was a pretty desperate situation around from last season. I watched them many times last season, and it was horrible, and it was really disappointing to see what was happening to them. So clearly sticking with him after relegation has paid dividends. But I think starting well, and maybe the early season pressure that comes along, the expectation that you have to start the season well is one thing. But if Ipswich can keep this going into the new year, I do feel the end of season pressure is a whole different set of problems that players and clubs have to deal with. The desire to kind of get over the finishing line, get the job done. It's really, really tough, and it can knock teams off course no matter how well they played up to that point. So I think the early signs are good, clearly. But League One is a very tough league to get out of. And I think Ipswich really need to stay focused to give themselves a fighting chance. And that's why Paul Lambert, with his experience in League One with Ipswich and what's expected of them, it's absolutely crucial that kind of Paul's experience comes to the fore and he kind of guides the club through, because it's going to be a tough season after what happened last season.
Yeah, and of course, a player you're a big fan of, James Norwood, up front for them, knows how to deal with that pressure in playoff finals, etc.
Well, we know he's got the goals, but also you look at his character and his mentality. And if you are to get promoted out of any league, you need players across the board that do that. And I'm sure Ipswich have players that do that. But if you've got a centre forward who plays with the tenacity, the desire that James Norwood plays the game with, you're not going to go far wrong. You know you're going to get 20 goals from him. But if you look at what he does to the players around as well, he does the manager's job on the pitch. He drags the best out of his teammates as well. And I know he's gone to a new club and there's pressure on him there, but he just plays the game his way. And that was a really fantastic signing for Ipswich Town. But it's not just one player that's going to make a difference this season. It is the squad. But when you've got a player who can guarantee you 20 plus goals, it's a very good start.
Yeah, Jobi, Leyton Orient fans will consider themselves to be in a similar position last season, of course. What's it like for the players knowing that they're expected to win week in, week out, similar to what Ipswich have got to do now?
Yeah, it can be tough, but, you have to relish it. You have to really sort of take it on board, especially some of the Ipswich players that haven't had a great time of it, the last sort of certainly season. And it's a different kind of pressure, of course, but for me, it gives you that little bit of an edge. Every single game, every point is important. Every time you go onto the pitch, you can't afford to drop points because you're trying to win a league, and the points return you need for that obviously means that you just can't have days where you're not at it or you're just not quite right. So I'd like to think they're relishing it. It comes with, as I say, different pressures. Being one of the biggest teams in any league, everybody turns up on Tuesday night or a Saturday at home or away. You've got to be right at it. And as I say, they seem to have started really well. They seem to be dealing with the pressure, but as Andy mentioned, as the season kicks on and that real anticipation and expectation ramps up, then it can really affect performances. So they're obviously going to want to be up there. Certainly come January, February time, which for me is the real business end of the season. And if they're up there, then I'm sure they'd fancy themselves to finish the job off.
Yeah, Andy, Shrewsbury, though, looking at them now, have only scored in 2 matches so far this season. How difficult is that for a side, defensively, knowing that their attacking players aren't really firing?
I think psychologically, yeah, I know what it was like. I played in teams when that wasn't happening, and you do feel under more pressure than normal. It's natural as defenders, you feel you're doing your job and then being let down at the other. But it's very important that when this is happening, the team doesn't kind of fracture along those lines and sees itself as one team, one unit, kind of attacking and defending. You have to play as one and believe you are playing as one. And I think coaches always say, kind of making chances is the encouraging thing. It shows that actually the creativity is there. It's just that you're not putting the ball in the net. They need to be more clinical, stick those chances away. And it's just one good result. You're one good result away from everything turning. And then all that kind of the worry and the kind of the fears and the kind of looking around that team and thinking that people aren't doing their jobs can be kind of swept away. It's amazing what a couple of goals or a good performance and a win can do for a team. That's been the story throughout football. That's how it is. But it's very, very important. I remember playing in teams. I was at Sheffield Wednesday when we, in essence, there's kind of 9 of us kind of defending, and we had Paolo Di Canio and Benny Carboni to basically win the game for us. And that is very much how kind of games went. So we just kind of, and sometimes it didn't happen, but we still knew that they were our kind of go-to strikers, and eventually they would get the goals. And that's what did happen. So you do have to kind of understand that they're not trying to miss chances. Strikers aren't looking at defenders and saying, well, you're looking to give penalties away or not defend properly. It's when doubts start to creep in that a team can kind of lose its way a little bit. So it's very important. Maybe the senior players as well get together and actually do the coach's job in the dressing room as well and say, look, we need to stick together because we can ride this out. And it's vitally important kind of the coaches and senior players kind of do their jobs to make sure that happens.
Now finally going down to League Two, and our featured game is Salford against Leyton Orient. And who better to ask about this one than Orient captain Jobi McAnuff? Obviously, you had the rivalry last year in the National League. How much have both sides developed since then?
Well, it hasn't been too long, obviously. It's still relatively early in the season. From our point of view, we're definitely looking at, keeping the ball a little bit better than we did at times last year. Obviously, the National League's a real tough league. You have to be very careful, what areas you have possession of the ball in. It's more difficult to really maintain possession for long periods of time just because of the nature of, some of the games. There's a lot more breaks in play and it's harder to get a flow in the games. So from our point of view, we've certainly been looking at that, and our possession has certainly improved, and not just our possession, but possession in real key areas where we could go and hurt teams and score goals. We've had a little look at Salford, and from our point of view, they're pretty similar to what they were last year. I think they'll be very robust. Physically, they're a very, very strong team. I think in the end, making that change that they did, they went to sort of three at the back, with wing backs, and just got a little bit more solid and a bit harder to beat really for a period, and that served them well. And from what we've seen so far, they've carried on in a similar vein this season.
Andy, of course, no wins since the opening day. They were one of the favourites for promotion, Salford, when the season began. It's well documented that the class of 92 owners expect and budget for success. Will Graham Alexander be feeling the pressure now? Will he be given that time, do you feel?
He absolutely will be feeling the pressure. I think from the outside, fans might look at kind of League Two management coaching as maybe that much easier than the Championship or League One, that the pressure isn't as intense. But trust me, from the conversations I've had with coaches at that level, it absolutely is a pressurised environment for many, many different reasons, mainly probably financial. But Graham Alexander is under the most pressure, I would say, in that division. Of course, the backing he's getting financially from the owners. That kind of money is very unusual in League Two. But the expectations are clearly very high. He knows full well what he has to achieve. So he's under pressure. I think it's because of that kind of Salford setup. They are a scalp for every team that they play. So coping, I think, with those high expectations will take everything that Graham has ever learned from his really extensive football career. From the outside, it looks the perfect job, but no football job is absolutely perfect. And the pressure on Graham will be enormous.
And Jobi, finally for you, how far are you off from a return? We obviously know you've been injured for your return to the EFL. And you've been coaching so far. What has it been like having that step up for you as well?
Yeah, it's been brilliant. First of all, from an injury point of view, I'm hoping to be back in a couple of weeks. I've been back running the last sort of 2 weeks, but obviously missed pre-season, so got a fair bit of work to do on that front. But yeah, feeling good and hopefully back out there sooner rather than later. Doesn't get any easier as you get older. I'm sure Andy testified to that.
Try running when you're 50, Jobi, then you'll really feel it, eh?
Yeah. So yeah, that's taken a little bit longer than I would have liked, but as I say, it is what it is when you're 37 going on 38. So
you're a young man. You're a young man.
Yeah, I wish. But the coaching side of things has been great in that respect. It's really given me something else to focus on. When you're injured, sometimes you kind of feel a little bit, isolated and out of it. But obviously being part of the coaching setup now, supporting Ross and Danny, it's been brilliant for me. And obviously on a match day, very much being involved. On the touchline, has been a great experience so far, and one that I'm really enjoying, and just trying to pick up as much as I can in that respect. And as I say, you definitely see things from a different point of view, on this side of the line, and it's been a real eye opener for me, but one I'm thoroughly enjoying, and looking forward to continuing.
Jobi, can I ask you about coaching? What was it? Something you always planned to do, or is it something that kind of developed throughout your career? Kind of the interest in going into that side of the game?
Yeah, certainly in the latter stages of my career, Andy, I've sort of started to look at things differently. You sort of look into decisions a little bit more. You start seeing things from the manager's perspective rather than it just being about you as, a young pro, why am I not playing, or, whatever the reasoning is. And
so you lose all that selfishness, don't you, and start thinking of the bigger picture.
100%, 100%. And I think it's really helped because you can then take that on to, when you speak to some of the other lads that are going through their individual situations, and just try and give them a bit more perspective. But yeah, it's a completely different ball game in terms of preparing sessions and the amount of work that goes into that, and it's been a real good, as I say, eye opener for me. And it's probably come on a little bit sooner, obviously with the tragic passing of Justin.
Yes, of
course. But it's certainly something that we had discussed and was certainly something that would have happened, at some point down the line. So, as I say, it's something I enjoy being a part of. And, the more I get into, the more, I enjoy it at the moment. So
it's Justin clearly going to be an inspiration for you. I've heard some of the interviews you did after he passed away. Clearly, in terms of your coaching, not just as a player, what he's done for you, but as a coach, the way that he coached, the way he managed, is that something that you could take aspects of that into your own career?
Oh, 100%. Particularly the man management style. Just his relationship with players. I've had so many managers, and I get it completely, where, they're quite standoffish. You don't see a lot of them. It's maybe just a match day or, a bit of prep work on a Thursday or Friday, but your interaction with some of them can be quite limited. With Justin, it was completely the other way around, where, you felt as though, you got on with him as much as the other lads in the changing room, and he just had a great balance to him. It wasn't a thing of thinking we were too close, that he didn't have the respect or, couldn't command a room. It was completely the opposite. And I think because we had such a good relationship, not just myself, but all the other lads, you really went out there, and as much as you want to win for your teammates and the club, you never wanted to let him down. And I think that goes a long way, in them real testing times, digging a result away from home on a Tuesday night somewhere, or, and if you didn't, you feel like you let him down as much as anybody else. So for me, that's certainly a part of management, as I say, that I would certainly look to take on with myself.
That's fantastic.
Well, Jobi, good luck juggling your media career, your coaching career, and your playing career as well at the same time. Me and Andy will just stick to the media. But guys, thank you very much for joining us on the EFL podcast this week, and both have a good weekend.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
The official EFL podcast. The best reaction to all the match action. Available every week.